Hello, everybody. This is Board Game Chats. I'm Myron,
And I'm Chris.
and we're here to talk with you and some of our friends most of the time about board games and their lives as they play them. Over to you, Chris, to introduce our guest.
Okay. Today's guest is AJ Brandon. AJ is a friend of mine of several years. AJ, you've been, I would say, instrumental in introducing me to many of the friends that I have and in my game group, including my co-host, Myron, actually. AJ has
True story.
Yeah, it's very true, right? AJ has a unique perspective on games. I'm always a little surprised at the things that he has to say, and I hope that he'll share some of that with us. I also think, AJ, from my recollections, you have a pretty diverse work background that I'm hoping that you'll share a little bit with us. I think all of that will make you an interesting guest. And of course, AJ, you are a very important special friend, and we're happy to have you on the show. So welcome, AJ. Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. I've been called a lot worse than that.
Hey, welcome, AJ. So I know that Chris knows you a lot more than I do, but for people who don't know the mysterious magical creature known as AJ, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you want the people who are listening to this episode to know about you as we get into it?
Well, as Chris alluded to, I've had a bit of a weird history when it comes to jobs. I worked at Tim Hortons for a few years, ended there as a manager, and then became a lumberjack, then a financial advisor, then started working at a board game store. So pretty natural career trajectory. And, and since the pandemic hit, I was laid off from Bliss, and I started working at a board game publisher, Jelly Bean Games. And I've been doing quality assurance there, as well as some in-house design and development. So that's my career history. And in terms of just personal interests regarding to board games, I've just always loved them. My parents have introduced me to board games. You know, the quote-unquote classics, you know, Trivial Pursuit and Milborn's Monopoly Risk since I was a kid. And, I don't play those games anymore, but the love of board games has stuck with me.
Cool.
Yeah, I remember like my earliest memories about playing board games are like Monopoly with like totally like hacked rules with my brother like being the banker, and I'm putting air quotes up, and you just never knowing how, I was younger than my brother, so it didn't dawn on me that my brother always had cash to like buy everything because he was the banker. But yeah.
It's funny. I actually did the opposite. I always hated Monopoly, and what I would do is I would always offer to be the banker, and I'd pick somebody else, and I would just stack them with cash. Whenever I had to give them money, I give them twice that amount, just so the game would end faster.
Well, yeah, that's good.
That game can go on. Yes.
Actually, I've heard from people that the reason the game goes on long is because we all sort of learn the rules incorrectly and house rules all the game to make it more interesting for us. And that's why it's, an 8-hour game. And that if you play by the rules correctly, it's not nearly as bad.
That's one of the reasons.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. I'm not sure I'm willing to find out if
free
that's
parking
true.
does nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So this question, I guess...
The last time I played... go on. Sorry.
That's okay. I was going to say this question is sort of a question to all of us. So why do you play board games? Why do we play board games?
For myself, it's really just about the people. Like there's somebody who asked me one time, what would you do if you just couldn't play board games ever again? This is relating to the pandemic, of course. I was like, I wouldn't care that much, and that shocked him because obviously my whole life, my primary hobby and my career has been focused around board games for years, right? And I'm very interested in basically all aspects of it, from design, development to the final product. But for me, board games are just a thing to do with people that I love, And if you had my favorite game sitting out, but I would have to play with someone who I wasn't that fond of, I wouldn't be that interested in playing it. And, if I was playing a game that I really didn't like, but with people that I loved, I'd still have a good time with it. So for me, board games are just a very convenient means to an end, and the end is just spending time with people that I care about.
Cool. I think I have to agree with that.
I'm very similar to that, AJ. Like for me, like I like board games because I like hanging out with people. Like the journey is the important part to me. I'm not very competitive by nature, but what I will do is to get to have fun. I will typically make it more difficult for the people who really want to win. But it's about the board games being the setting for me to spend times with people that I like and love. When I go like if I go to a convention like Gen Con, I will actually play like one new game, like but with like stacked with all of my friends on the sort of like on the show floor or like in the virtual conferences, like in the tabletop simulator or whatever. But when I go, I'll spend most of the time with my friends, and we'll do kind of like it's like an extended session of us all having our schedules cleared to play together. When I'm in settings where it's just like, all right, new game, new people, I don't really like those that much because like the board games for me are and this isn't exactly what you said, but the board games are the setting for.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The
That's
setting
good,
for the reason that we're all together. So on that subject, how important is it to you, AJ, to game or meet new people in the hobby?
So this might surprise a lot of people who know me because I'm very friendly and outgoing, but I don't actually like meeting new people that much.
Really?
So here's a weird flex I'm gonna do. I have lots of wonderful friends. I don't really need to have more.
Right.
I came to sort of a weird realization when I was in just a couple years after high school. I was trying to keep up with all the people that I made, all the friends that I made during high school, and with all the friends I was making after high school. And it was really, really exhausting. Like every single free day that I had was scheduled out to see people, and I would often bundle multiple people hanging out the same day. And some of my friends said, like, it feels like you're devaluing me because because I feel like I'm just a number, and it's like, oh yeah, 2 months out from now, I'll schedule that one day, and then I'll see you in another couple months once I've cycled my way through the friend group again. And a different friend of mine kind of callously pointed out that there were more people that I considered good friends than I had days in the year, and that's just not a thing that you can maintain. Tragically, we only have so many days on this earth, and so I'm not gonna say like I made cuts, but like I stopped trying so hard. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And for me, like making new friends is kind of costly because it means that I can't spend as much time on the relationships that I already hold really dear.
That's really interesting because, I mean, what do you do in that situation? How do you, not make cuts, but make cuts? Like, how do you manage that? How did you, or how do you continue to?
So the easiest thing to do is just don't reach out to someone and see if they ever reach out to you. And you know what? It turns out a lot of people are willing or are very happy to be your friend when you're the one putting all the effort in. But as soon as you sort of put it on them to actually extend and put in the effort and to reach out and to make plans and to make things happen, a lot of those friendships do disappear. And it's not malicious. It's not that you aren't important to them even. It's that they have the same trouble I do. They only have so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
Right. That reciprocity piece is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a combination of like friends, work stuff that I really, really, really think I should want to do. And so like this month, for the first month, I actually created a concept called Know Nothing Weekend, where I block my calendar out for Saturday and Sunday, and I'm like, look, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm literally just I'm gonna sit on the couch. I might sit on the couch with my wife, but like if she asks for too much, I'll like go and lay down and like play video games in the bedroom. But like sitting on the couch, floor is lava. Not the super awesome show on Netflix. It's actually called Floor is Lava. But like actually, like I'm not doing anything. No, nothing weekends. I'm here for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you need days like that.
I think
what
I was going to ask a question about. I was going to ask a question about like one thing that your friends might not know, but I think like particularly if you've been cut, you would know. Already told us, AJ. No offense, anyone. It's not you. It's It's AJ.
I think what you said though is really important. Chris. I think what you said, JJ, is really important. It's not a malicious thing. It's not, you can't take it personally if the person doesn't call, or contact you once a year or whatever like that. If you start to take it personally, you're the one that is suffering. You're limiting your interaction with this person who you consider a good friend. And you just have to say, we're all busy and we all have this busy, crazy life, and hopefully we will connect. And if I don't talk to you for a year or 2 or 3, but you reach out or I reach out, I think that you have to just take the time that you can with the people that you care about and do the best you can, right? Is that sort of what you're saying with your philosophy of making cuts but not making cuts?
For sure. And I mean, part of it is like, if someone does put in the effort, that if they do reach out to me unprompted, then I'm gonna redouble that effort. I'm gonna put all that effort into that relationship. So like I'm not afraid of anyone listening to this and being offended, because that means that they also haven't put in the effort in the relationship as well. So yeah, and like I said, like you said, there's nothing malicious about it. We all have limited time, and geography can be really difficult to manage. Everyone's really feeling that because of the pandemic, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's just life. It's sad, but if you want people to be in your life, Peter said this very well. He said, if you want people to be in your life, like, find a project to do with them, find something like this, like that you two are doing. That's a great excuse to make some time and to spend time with people.
Yeah. It's like when the whole plague situation was starting, I used to describe it as, because people would be like, I'm shut off from everything. And I was like, all right, well, were the 1,000 people that you saw every day or 10,000 people you saw every day like really meaningful relationships for you? And so maybe if you adopt like a small island approach to it, maybe you can settle for quality over quantity, and like really like pick 4 or 5 friendships, 2 or 3 friendships, even one friendship to really lean into. Because particularly now, like, you're gonna need like your support network. You're gonna need that support network to be like way deeper than like the superficial level to get through a whole plague situation.
Yeah. It's a timely
really
conversation.
Hard to form super deep relationships if you're spending that much time with so many different people, right?
Yeah, that's true. So I'd really like to hear what you're working on right now with Jelly Bean Games and what's happening, what kinds of things you're doing with them. You said quality assurance. How does that work, and what is that exactly?
So quality assurance is sort of a misnomer for what I do. Technically, it's quality control, which is going through and making sure that there's no errors before it goes to print. So that can be things from gameplay issues, like edge cases. It could be things like just typos, and it could be really anything that's going to harm the final product's quality. And a lot of people sort of conflate the two of quality assurance and quality control. Technically, quality assurance comes after production, and quality control happens before production. But before I was doing both, because I was doing customer service. But more recently, they took me off customer service to give me more time for the design end of things. And so to that end, I've been developing a game that we haven't announced yet, and I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about, but it's pretty cool. And then there's one that hasn't been announced yet, but I'm sure I am allowed to talk about it. And that's an in-house designed mega game that I'm working on with Peter Hayward, the owner of the company, as a co-design, which I'm very, very excited about.
Oh, very cool. Can you tell us more about that, or what's the name of it, or do you have a working name?
Yep. So for those of you not familiar, a mega game is kind of like a Model UN mixed with a role-playing game, mixed with a board game for 40 to 70-ish people for like 6 hours. It's a really, really epic experience, and everyone's playing a lot of asymmetric games. Some people might have literally zero like gameplay rules. It's all negotiation and conversation. And some people are playing much more of a like heads down sort of a strategy game. And the working title is called Royal Blood. It's a Game of Thrones-esque medieval fantasy sort of thing with lots of betrayals, lots of backstabbing, lots of wars, and lots of negotiation.
Wow, that's very cool. That sounds like very, very
Sounds
interesting.
intense.
So that's one of those mega games is usually, everyone's in one big room or several smaller rooms that are kind of all adjoined. Is that the kind of thing that we're looking at here?
Yes, so
Something
we
like that?
are primarily designing this around digital platforms, actually. We are designing
Yeah.
this... Yeah, right?
I was gonna ask, like, you're gonna have an app, like what? Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so the core of what we're doing right now is we're making it for Discord and for digital platforms to be able to run them remotely. One of the things is we are just a remote team, so it's very convenient anyway. But long term, I imagine we will be adapting this to a physical medium if it's successful, which I think it will be. I hope it will be.
Cool.
I believe it's going to be successful, AJ, because I believe in you, man.
I do appreciate that.
I mean, I'm laughing, but like, it's true.
Cool. I as a game designer, I know I've play tested several of your games, quite a few of them, AJ. So I'd have to agree. I'm really excited to hear about this. And I've actually never played a mega game. I don't know if I have the stamina to go for 6 or 7 hours of a game, but it really appeals to me. I like this sort of, it's almost kind of a role-playing game / strategy game, right? That's kind of what I think of as when I think of this mega game experience.
Yeah, so one thing that we sort of want to differentiate ourselves from traditional mega games a little bit is traditional mega games can run anywhere from pure like board game. They originally started from war games, so they'd be like large scale war games, just a lot of players playing the same war game, basically. And what the term has sort of come to mean more commonly is basically a LARP. Like, let's not mince words here. Most mega games, if you've watched the Shut Up and Sit Down, Watch the Skies video, they're basically just LARPs. There's a tiny thread of rules to keep everything connected, but mostly it's being run through, they call them control. You would know them from role-playing games as DMs.
Okay. Can you explain LARP for anyone who's not familiar? LARP.
Certainly. So LARP is, live action role-playing game. And the idea of the LARP is basically like a Dungeons and Dragons sort of thing mixed with improv, basically. You're doing all this in real time. You're all playing in character. And again, there's a wide spectrum of things here. But again, typically it's very far away from the rules-heavy side. Typically, these are extremely rules-light. And like I said, most of the mega games that are out there are very rules-light. And they really encourage a lot of player creativity, making up rules as you go. And that's one of the things where we have to shy away from that. So part of the thing is mega games are not commercially viable right now because it's being run very, I don't mean to be dismissive in any way, by the way, but it's being run very much as a passion project, as like a hobby, a part-time sort of thing. And so because of that, they pour in tons and tons of hours designing and running these things and undercharging their tickets. And as a result, they often lose money on running these games.
Right.
And part of it too is if you see the control / DMs roles for the games, they actually have to pay for tickets in most cases. In the best case scenario, they're volunteers. But oftentimes you'll see like 15, maybe even up to 20 DMs for a 60, 70 person game. And if you're actually paying those people like we intend to, it becomes very expensive very fast, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the core tenets of our design is to err more towards the board game side and less towards the LARPing side. So we still want to have very simple, easy to grok rules and have a lot of flexibility for players who want to be able to sort of get into their role and role play a bit. But there's going to be less of the on-the-fly rules creation than you would expect in something like Watch the Skies.
Right, like I used to play this mega game called National Security Decision Makers at Gen Con, and I loved the concept, but like every time I played at about the 2.5 hour mark, no additional rules were introduced to me, and it was all live action role playing. So like at that point, you understood your rules, you understood what the goals were, all the roles were identified, all the players were out in the field. The conflicts, like, you got a sense for the system, but then I grew tired like for me personally, I don't really like games that much where it's a lot of like improv. Like for example,
Mm.
I can play One Night Werewolf for about maybe like 2 rounds. Or like the very large werewolf for maybe an hour, but after that, like for me it gets very intense because it's just me essentially mostly lying and or manipulating people directly. That's just me. Like I know people have incredible fun with those games, and that's totally cool. I did want to sneak something in though, AJ. So you said you do QC. Do you do QC on both the design elements, the written pieces, as well as the digital application?
Right. So that's not for this game specifically. I'll be getting someone else to do like the final passes for this one. But broadly speaking, yes, I do quality control for all aspects of the game. It's not just me that's looking over these things. Like I'll be coordinating with our proofreaders, right? And we'll get professional proofreader because I'm honestly not that good at English. And we'll get a bunch of people from our mailing list to look over it as well after the professional, just to see if there's any last things we could miss. So we have multiple people combing over this at every possible step to make sure that no errors get through. But yes, I do all the steps, even if I'm not the only hand in there.
Right. Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
So that's great. You've got a couple of games in the works. I know that game design's been since I met you, that was a big part of who you are and what you're doing. Why do you gravitate towards game design? What do you think you get out of it?
It's an interesting question, and it's something that I'd never actually thought about before. But I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that it was just a hobby that I was really interested in, and because I was interested in it, it just got a lot of my attention. And as time went on, and I started to realize that you could design your own games, that became more and more appealing to me. And I took it very seriously. I've watched and listened to hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of hours of game design content, even from when I was much younger, in order to, because I knew I wanted to take this seriously, even when I thought that I wasn't going to make any money off of doing this sort of thing. But I think a lot of it just came down to my interest in the hobby in general. And the thing that drew me to the hobby initially wasn't what I talk about being the driving force now, which is spending time with friends. It was actually just because of how much I sucked at video games. Because I would I would sit down to play video games, and I was 5 years younger than my sister, so she would be much better than I would be at these things. And it felt awful that I would always lose and always see how much better she and all my other friends were at video games than I was. And then I remember my cousin sat down to play Yu-Gi-Oh with me one time, and I realized I can just sit here and I can take my sweet time and I can find the right answer. The right answer is here, and I don't need reflexes for it. I just need the time to figure it out. And that was really, really appealing to me.
Cool.
Well, I'm a video gamer too, and I will say I'll just shoot my shot here. I think that it depends on the video game. Like if it's like Super Mario or like Street Fighter or like games that are just like all twitch based on reflexes and like memorizing everything, I don't really like those games either. I tend to like strategy games. I tend to like games where you build characters, and so there's more strategy involved. But I found that because of the types of games that I like, those are the things that actually really got me into like more modern board games, because they often play like that. Now there are games where it's like like Lunacy, where you literally like my wife Anna, she actually got a concussion while playing Lunacy. Like it's like man on man defense, woman on woman defense, anything goes. Whatever happens during Lunacy stays in Lunacy, that kind of thing. But like for the most part though, I like games where your strategy is your own, but your strategy is not impacted by other people. It's not like a direct competition. So I think we'll get more into like specific types of games later on, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a team.
Cool.
And defend video games a little bit.
Oh, for sure. And I should say, like, that was me at age 10. I have a very different relationship with video games now. I love video games, And while I'm still not great at them, I'm doing a lot better.
That's what I call the younger sibling syndrome. If you have an older sibling, you're just always struggling to keep up and to fight with them and to get, your just rewards. I have a younger sister who's 10 years younger, and I look back and I feel kind of bad for how many times I beat her at games, and I should have just let her win a couple of times. I was just very harsh on her. So
you made her stronger though, Chris.
Yeah, I probably did. That's very true. So I want to go back to game design because I know that this is a big thing, and I think there's a lot to talk about with it. The reason I asked the question about, why you do it is because I know that there's an intense amount of time that goes into crafting a game, into designing a game. There's that initial idea and then, creating some sort of prototype, and then hours and hours and hours of painful playtesting and revising. And I wonder, how has that process changed for you throughout this pandemic? And I guess more generally, do you enjoy playtesting? I think it's something that scares a lot of designers off. So I just want to hear your thoughts on playtesting in general.
So in terms of how it's changed, it's actually gotten a lot better for me because I don't live in a big population center. And so if I wanted to playtest with people, it would be a 2-hour round trip for me every time I wanted to do that. So the fact that basically everybody else was forced online was very convenient for me. So I've gotten more playtesting done this year than ever before. It's been honestly really great. And in terms of your other question, you were asking me, what were you asking me for the other half? It was, do I enjoy playtesting?
Yeah.
I do. I really do. I actually enjoy designing games more than I enjoy playing them, honestly. And a lot of that comes down to, it's similar kinds of fun a lot of times. When you're playing a board game, you're trying to sort of break these systems, and you're trying to figure out what the best route is, and you're doing these problem solving things, right? That's a lot of what you're doing in game design as well. And so to me, it's almost like the ultimate game in a way is trying to design one. And because you can do literally anything, you've got so many different tools at your disposal. It's a very creatively expressive thing to spend your time on. And for me, I've just never been one to be stressed out about criticism. I think a lot of it has to do with me just having really low self-esteem when I was younger, and then sort of coming to terms with things and growing up and being okay with who I am and everything like that. And so for me, honestly, if someone gives me negative feedback on a game, that's good, because that means that I now know a problem that I can fix. Before they said something, I didn't know that there was an issue that I could fix. And similarly, this is maybe just a weird personal quirk that I have, but praise actually just means nothing to me either. So I'm very detached from what I'm working on. And there was an interesting book that I was reading actually that Peter got me onto, and it was one of the principles in it was basically talking about how to get over yourself and just get things done. And basically what he was saying was just sit down, put in the hours. And if what you make is garbage, it doesn't matter. If it's great, it doesn't matter. All that matters is you came, you sat down, and you put in the work. And to an extent, I really find that interesting, to just sort of distance yourself from your work, from both the failures and successes. Because if you tie the successes of yourself if you tie your successes to yourself, but you don't tie the failures to yourself, that's kind of a recipe for disaster, because even though you're sort of ignoring all the negative stuff, you're not taking that baggage on, well, the absence of a success is still going to wear on you because you're still putting yourself into that. Whereas if you can say, listen, I'm just doing the best I can do, and if it turns out to be something, that's great. If it doesn't turn out to be something, that's also great. I think there's something really, really poetic about that. And so for me, I honestly, if someone gives me praise, if it's something that I already knew was good or thought was good, it doesn't mean anything to me. The only times that compliments mean something to me is if it's someone that I respect telling me something I didn't know. And the only times that someone can hurt me with criticism is if it's someone that I respect telling me something that I didn't know about myself. So it's the same thing but in reverse, right?
Right.
If I'm already aware of a flaw and you point out that flaw, it's not going to hurt my feelings because I already know that I have that issue, right? But if it's someone that I respect telling me something that is an issue and I wasn't aware of it, then I'm not going to feel great about that. But again, if they're pointing it out in love to try and help me be a better person, it's not going to hurt my feelings. It's very hard to offend me. The last time I was offended was literally years ago, and I remember it very vividly because it was such a painful experience having a friend that I thought knew me really well and that didn't. And it wasn't that the words they were saying hurt me because they were true. It was that it hurt me that this person would say those things to me when I knew what they were saying wasn't true.
Hmm.
Right. Well,
That's
it's like,
cool.
I get that. I get like from like a game design perspective and like your interest perspective, it sounds like the journey is the important piece. So like some people love the end, some people love the beginning, but like putting the time in and it's like how you are as you go through it. Like if you know that you go and you put your heart into it and you put everything that you have into it, like that journey, like you bring people around that like are cool spending that journey with you. And it goes back to, like where you put your energy at, like when it comes to numbers of friends. It sounds like you found out a great balance for your life where you're doing things that you find to be valuable with people who are the most valuable to you. And that's, I mean, if someone can find that balance, no matter what they do, that's an amazing journey, particularly in plague time.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of the Japanese concept ikigai?
No. That sounds familiar though.
So what ikigai is, if you Google it, you'll see a 4-circle Venn diagram that overlaps, and it has these different categories. And basically, what it's doing is it's giving you a way to break down something that you are doing in your life. And the quadrants are something that you love, something that you can get paid for, something that the world needs, and oh shoot, I should know the last one. This is like my favorite thing. I'm going to Google it really quick. You can edit this out, right? Something that you love. Oh wait, something that you're good at. Of course, you have to be good at the thing. So sorry. So it's something that you love, something that the world needs, something you can get paid for, and critically, something that you're good at. And so the idea is that if you have some of these things, but not all of them, then you're going to be left hollow in some way or another. So for instance, if there's something that you're good at and you can get paid for, well, you just found yourself a profession. But it's not something that you love. It's not something that the world actually needs. If you're just moving numbers around for a company, maybe their profits go up a little bit, but the world could have lived without those numbers being slightly increased. And if it's not something that you love, you're at one of those like dead end jobs that might make you feel miserable, So
Right.
If you can find something that's in perfect harmony with all 4 of those things, it's something that you really care about, that you really love. It's something that actively benefits the world around you. It's something that you can actually make a living off of, and it's something that you're good at. Well, then you found the perfect like reason for being. That's ikigai. So for whoever you are out there, if you can find that thing that you can hit all those notes on, that's the type of thing where now you're not looking at work-life balance. You're looking at work-life integration. Now the thing that you're doing that you're getting money for is also the thing that's going to be super fulfilling for you on many different metrics.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like your journey for like career, like the thing that I'm good at of that formula, from being a lumberjack, from working at Tim Hortons, from being a manager, is game design that for you?
Yes. I would also say I've got other skills that are very good. Like I think that I've got really high emotional intelligence. I think I'm really good at managing people. But I think that game design is definitely the thing that I'm the most passionate about. And I think it's the thing I'm the best. And I still have a long way to go for my game design journey. Like I see where I'm at and I see where the greats are, and I'm not even close. I've got a long way to go, and I'm excited for it.
Right.
Cool. So I realized while you were talking that we've mentioned Peter and we've mentioned Jelly Bean Games, but we haven't really explained who they are. Peter is Peter Hayward. He's the owner and he's a game designer of Jelly Bean Games. Can you tell us more about Jelly Bean Games? Like, what games have you guys published? What's something that we'd all know? I think I know. I own a few, so I know. But why don't you tell us?
For sure. Yeah, so he would be very, very cross if I didn't say Peter C. Hayward. He's very particular.
Right. So Peter C. Hayward, yes.
He's a wonderful guy. If you ever see someone with a blue beard at a con, you'll know it's him. He's got very clear branding on this one. And he's one of my best friends. I've known him for years. Basically, right when I got deep into board games 5-ish years ago, he was right there at the same time. And so I've known him for a while. And recently he hired me on for Jelly Bean Games. And Jelly Bean Games is his board game company. He has many different creative endeavors, but the one that's pertinent to this conversation is Jelly Bean Games, of course. And Jelly Bean Games, the goal of the company is eventually to be the Pixar of board games. And
Nice.
right now, what we're primarily focusing on is games that kids can play with kids can play with adults, and adults can play with kids. And no matter what the combination is, they're always having a good time. And that's a really, really tall order. If you've ever tried to play one of those stupid kids games with with a kid before, some of those games are pretty patronizing would be the nice word for it.
Yeah.
And Jelly Bean Games do not talk down to people. Jelly Bean Games, I can stand behind the vast majority of our games. I would enjoy playing regardless of saying. And what we're doing right now is expanding to other sort of branding. So Coffee Bean Games are more like not like adult in that way line, but more less kid focused games, right? So these are more like traditional hobby games. And so we've got a couple ones coming up very soon, and we may be doing an entirely separate line for the mega games. If those take off, we might be going deep in that and doing a lot with that. But yeah, some of the games that you might know from Jelly Bean Games, we are an indie publisher. We don't have the reach of like a Stonemaier or anything like that. But I would say the most popular ones by far would be Dracula's Feast, which is a logical deduction game. And that one's had a second edition recently. Gorgeous, gorgeous new art. And I think probably Village Pillage would be the other really popular one. And that one is kind of like a, the old Princess Bride thing where, oh, I wouldn't pass you the poison, so that means that I must have the poison. But if I knew that you knew that, it's got a lot of that sort of double think to it. And the way that one works is you've got sort of these rock, paper, scissors-esque cards where some cards will give you resources, and some cards will steal resources, some cards will block the stealing, some cards will let you buy new cool cards. And so you've got this sort of rock, paper, scissors-esque dynamic, and each turn you're going to be playing those to your neighbors, sort of between two cities style. So one to the player on the left, one to the player on your right, and you're trying to resource manage these different characters and plan out where they're going to be most effective. But again, these are very simple games, so even though that might sound like, sounds like there's a lot of game to that in terms of, picking which cards you're going to play at what times and, using these different abilities and stuff. But these games do play very well with kids. My 5-year-old niece can play all of these games with me pretty easily, pretty much.
That's cool. Yeah.
Now, do you have,
go ahead,
for a game to be playable by like a 5-year-old and like adults, are there like different, like, I don't know, like different types of like rules, like, like for example, like with kids playing with kids, or I'm assuming a 5-year-old could play with other 5-year-olds. Do y'all like have like different rule sets that have like simpler language for like if kids are playing it with themselves, or like how do you manage that?
So the crucial thing is we don't write rule books for kids. We write rule books for adults. And I think that that's really important because you need to have them. It's very hard writing rules. Writing rules is one of the hardest parts about making a game, actually, because you have to be so clear and you have to be so concise. We've all picked up a 45-page rule book and like rolled our eyes and put it back in the box, right?
Yeah.
There's a great game called Catacombs, and I have the 3rd edition of it. And I had someone come back to the store after buying this game, and they said to me, listen, we just could not get through this rule book. Can you help us? I had them playing the game in under 1 minute. Like,
wow.
They knew how to play. They knew everything how it worked, why would you waste everyone's time like that? You know,
Yeah.
and so I'm not trying to be mean to the makers of Catacombs. So what I'm trying to illustrate is just how hard this is. That a super light dexterity game can be that complicated when they try to explain every little thing. And so, in order to sort of service that, what we do is we write the rule books for the adults. The adults are probably going to have to teach the kids, you know, depending on age and everything. You know, some kids have pretty good reading comprehension and everything. But after that, the kids should be just fine. We do not have different rule sets for kids to play with kids. The rule sets are very simple, but they're very robust. They're simple enough for kids. They're robust enough to keep adults' attention. And if you look at the core gameplay loop of any of our games, it's always going to be a very simple list of actions that you can pick off of them, or you might be just doing one single action on a turn. They're all very, very simple and intuitive and easy to get into.
Nice.
Great. I'm most familiar with Village Pillage, and we love that game. As all adults, we all play it and regularly and like it. But you brought up someone bringing stuff back to the store, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you a little bit about Board Game Bliss. That's where we met, and I happen to know that you have a uncanny ability to recommend games to people. You are it's magic watching you do it. I'd like to play a game that is 3 to 4 players in under 30 minutes, is a strategic game, is really in-depth and thinky, and has really cool pieces. And I've seen you be like, oh, how about this, or this? What is it about you that makes you so good at that? Like, how do you do that? I have to say, it seems like magic to me.
So honestly, it's going to seem a lot less magical when I say it like this.
That's
I'm
good.
basically just a human flowchart.
Human flowchart.
Have you ever played that little web game Akinator? It's like 20 questions with a AI, basically.
No.
So what you do is if you go to akinator.com, you'll basically pick something, like literally anything. You can any character. You might pick Jimmy Neutron. And so then they'll ask you questions like, is this character fictional? Is this a cartoon? Is this whatever? And every one of these questions, it's crossing off massive swaths of possibilities, right? So like as soon as you said 3 to 4 players, a couple games pop into my head. And then you said, okay, and I want it to be, I forget what you said now, but you said you want it to be thinky, and you said a few other criteria. Every one of those stages, I'm just cutting off massive swaths of possibilities until I get down to a more manageable number. Now, I do cheat sometimes. I will very often pull up BGG and just look at the games that I rated highly, and I'll just give them a quick scroll. You know, if nothing comes to mind immediately, that's a pretty painless way of quickly refreshing myself on things. Because I might think, oh yeah, you know what, that game does fit really nicely with what they're talking about. You know, but like it's honestly not that hard when if someone gives me a bunch of criteria. That just means like that gets me down to like 2 or 3 recommendations pretty quickly. And because, you know, I haven't played a million games. I've only played, I don't know, 1,000 games. And so
only 1,000.
Yeah. And so it's not too hard to whittle down to some ones that I think would be pretty good. Easier if they have like a theme in mind. Like if someone says, I'm looking for a pirate game, I really like pirates. It's like, okay, well, you know, out of the 1,000 games I've played, I've probably played, I don't know, half a dozen, maybe 10 pirate themed games. Of those 10, I would recommend 3. And of those 3, your other criteria wills it down to 2. So now I'll say, here's the 2 games that I might suggest. And then they can pick one of the 2. Or sometimes what makes my job hard is they'll be like, you know what, neither of those are what I'm looking for. And sometimes, you know, that lets me sort of pivot into something else. Sometimes you'll learn pretty quickly. Some people are just really, they don't know what they want. And so sometimes, like, that's my job. My job is to help them find something that they didn't know that they wanted in the first place. Because maybe they started thinking, oh, I just like pirates, and I heard board games were fun. I haven't really played board games before. But then after talking to them, I can figure out, oh, you know what? This person really has not played many board games at all. Maybe even the pirate games that I was thinking of are a little too much for you. And so a few questions to sort of to probe them. If you think like if you go to a doctor, right? You don't just walk in and say, hey, what's wrong with me? And they just tell you. they ask you questions. They say things like, well, where is the pain? What type of pain is it? Can you describe it?
Right.
And those
Where
are the
did she
types of
touch you?
questions.
That kind of
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. And so and so a lot of it is just trying to figure out the right questions to ask and knowing how to interpret their answers, because sometimes it might surprise you to hear this. Sometimes people are wrong about what they want. People don't know what they want. And part of that comes down to people not being able to articulate things. Like if I was to say to you, what types of movies are you into so I can recommend you one? That's easy for you because you've seen tons of movies. And so you
Right.
know what you like and what you don't like. If people have played less board games, that's the people who are going to be asking me for recommendations, by the way, then
Right.
it's going to be much harder for them. What if instead what if you were looking for a food recommendation? And I said, well, what type of food do you like? And you said, I like strawberries. And I said, what about strawberries is it that you like? That's a hard question.
Right.
How would you even describe the taste of a strawberry? This is actually a project that I'm working on to help people understand their tastes better. And it's called the Strawberry Scale because of how hard it is to describe. But what professional chefs do is they will say on a scale of 0 to 10, how astringent is it? How sweet is it? And as soon as you start hearing these terms, it allows you the vocabulary to describe and to think about the things that you've enjoyed before. But again, that takes time to get to. The people that are coming to the store and asking for recommendations off the cuff aren't there yet. I can work with them to sort of start to develop the tools over time. But if they just walk in, the immediate first thing is, I just want to get them a game that they're going to like so that they know that they can trust me and come back and ask for more recommendations. And sometimes I'll have customers sort of step in and try and help. And sometimes they are helpful. And sometimes they are not. Like
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, there was
I might be
there's
might
one
have been
time
one of those.
when there was a person. I probably appreciate it because I know that you're good at that type of thing. But there was one time in particular that stuck in my mind that a person came in, and after bouncing back and forth, I figured, I don't just recommend this all the time, but I figured Catan was the right pick for them. And I know that sounds like, oh yeah, what a lazy recommendation. Recommend Catan to everyone. But for this person,
I
for what they were
agree.
looking
That
for,
is not one
they
you
really
recommend
would've-
regularly. Sorry to interrupt. I know, I would
Yes.
agree. I've
I mean,
seen
I-
it firsthand. That's not one that you recommend regularly. So go on. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's good. And that's just what I was going to say is I recommended this game to them, and then someone piped up and they're like, oh, Catan's not that good. And immediately, this is the first time I'm talking to this customer, that builds distrust. Now she's like, well,
Right.
why does this other guy think the game's bad? And the guy says, I used to I like what it did for the hobby, but games are past there now. It's been 20 years. Now we got better games. And what I said was, listen, I am not recommending, I'm not recommending Catan for you. And I'm not even recommending Catan for me. I don't like Catan. I don't want to play Catan. But I'm not recommending games that I like. If you were a huge movie buff and someone was asking for a movie recommendation and they'd literally never seen a movie before, you wouldn't start with Parasite, some really nuanced foreign film. Right? Like Parasite was a great movie, but that's not where you start somebody.
Right.
And so a lot of recommending is knowing where the person is and helping to sort of on-ramp them so that they can develop their own tastes and figure out what types of things they like. If someone walks in and they've literally never played a game before, I'm not going to start them off with Sakura Arms or Twilight Imperium or these much more esoteric games, right? I'm going to say, listen, you've never played a game before? Let me bust out Wavelength. Let me pull out Insider. Let's play Indigo. These games that I can get you into and playing in seconds.
Right. It's just like with movies when as someone's developing their taste, and you say, hey, what do you want to play? And they'll tell you something, a good game, or what kind of movies you like, good ones that don't suck. And so there's a lot to that because I heard board games are fun. Give me a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is where,
That's I agree. I think that's what I really appreciate what you said, AJ, because I've watched you do it many, many times, and I know that it's not as easy as you're making it sound, but it's good to have some insight. I think that it's a skill that you have that is not one that everyone has. And in fact, I can think of a few occasions when I'd be talking to other customers, people that I didn't know, and you were busy off doing things, and they'd be like, asking me questions. Oh, I'm looking for a game like this, this, or this. And I'd be like, I thought I would be much better at this than I am. You're going to have to wait until AJ comes back and ask AJ because I don't work here. And apparently this is not a skill that I have at all. But I can teach you a game once you want to learn it, but I cannot recommend a game. So it's a definite skill. So yeah, I think that we've gone through that. I'm definitely going to have to look into that. What was it? Akinator.com? Is that how you pronounce
Akinator.
it?
Yeah,
Akinator.
I'll send you a link.
Okay, yeah.
Akinator.
It's super fun. It's so good. It's so effective. You'll pick the most obscure character, and it will always get it. You have to go really deep to trick it.
Interesting. We used to play a game called 20 Questions, and that was very similar to that. So I do want to look at that. Before we end here, I just want to say we got a question from a listener that I'd like to put to you. And Myron, I want you to feel free to answer this as well. The question has come from us from Mike Biter. On the topic of good sportsmanship, can you share some ideas on how not to be a sore loser? And I'm going to add to that, what kinds of things can you do to deal with people at your game table that don't accept losing very well?
The easiest way to be a humble winner and to make other people feel less bad about losing is to blame the game. If you look at a lot of very successful games, they will have elements of luck. And what that does is it gives your ego an out. Someone loses, oh, you rolled badly, or you didn't draw the card that you needed. This is actually very important. If you look at Magic the Gathering, Magic is an extremely challenging game, one of the most complicated games, possibly the most complicated game that exists. But the reason why they keep getting new players is because of the thing that everyone always complains about. Mana Screw, Mana Flood. You didn't draw the land cards that you needed in order to play your cards, and it put you behind. What that does is it gives new players a chance to beat the better players. And what it also does is when the newer players lose, they can blame the game. Oh, you drew that powerful card. I didn't draw mine. I didn't draw lands. I drew too many lands. And having that sort of ego shield is really, 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 really valuable. And as someone playing with another person, all you have to do is give it a little nudge. Just point to the thing that went particularly well for you. Just say, oh yeah, I just got lucky over here. Whatever. If you can blame the game, it protects their ego, makes them more likely to play with you again, and makes them feel like it wasn't their fault as much as it is. And that's why perfect information games like chess are much harder to get new people into, because if you made a mistake in chess, it is 100% your fault. You lost because you are bad, and there's nothing that anyone can say about it. Whereas in something like Exploding Kittens, it's so far in the opposite direction. It's like, well, I won, but maybe it doesn't feel like I won necessarily because you drew the kitten 7 times in a row. But
yeah, it's like going from like get good noob to like, hey, we play for fun. They're competitions, so the person is there and they just want to crush everyone. I would have a conversation with them, not in front of everyone, so it's like a conflict or anything like that, and just let them know, look, we're playing for fun, and it's probably not the right setting to like be getting into everyone's stuff like that. If you lose, trying different kinds of games. It could be that, so like when I play Catan, not to harp on Catan too much, I really have a bad time. But it's not because I get crushed, although I'm a sore loser when I play that game. There's some things about the mechanics of the game that really bother my worldview. And for example, when you start the game in the very first round, the position that you put the game in determines if you're a competitor or not in the first move. And I think that is
flawed.
That is not democratic. Like that bothers me, like to my core.
Yeah.
I like how you described it, AJ, the perfect information game. I like games where the strategy evolves over time and everyone has a chance to adjust their strategy. But that's in my nature. Like I live my life like that. And so it could be, like you said, AJ, the game. It could be that the person is coming and they have a different idea of what you're there to do as a group. You may have to have a conversation with them. And then there's like playing different kinds of games. How do they play in cooperative games? Do they begin bullying people when their team loses? Okay, all right. So it could be the person. So it's like the person of the game, and there's a few examples there. So hopefully that helps. And Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
I like what you said about I forget exactly how you worded it, but I'll often use it as this is just a learning game. I will say like, it's all right. I also like what you said. Blaming the game is it's an interesting perspective, because I almost feel like, AJ, what you were saying was that you were looking at it from a game design. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're basically saying is that a good game adds an element of luck, because that gives people who aren't so good at losing a chance to regain some ego. Would you say that's correct? I'm surprised to hear you say that. So have I interpreted it correctly?
Yeah, so the rule of thumb is the more casual your game, the more luck you want. And that's why in a lot of like classic party games, there's really heavy-handed catch-up mechanics and things like that, because they just want everyone to have a good time. And it's not a competitive game. No one actually cares who wins those games. Whereas the more competitive the game you have, the less luck you want, because the hardcore gamers are the ones that are going to be playing your hardcore game. And if there's too much luck in those, then it's going to really upset them. But if you have no luck, it makes it really hard for new players to join in the game. So it's a tricky balance, and it's different for every game. But yeah, the rule of thumb is the more you want to allow new people into the game, the more you want luck to be a component. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as, some games have it out there. But as long as you have just enough to blame on something other than yourself, which is, by the way, the exact opposite of how to get better at games. But anyway.
Right. So it's like between like a little bit of luck and Mario Party. For anyone who's ever played Mario Party, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, I'll just say it. Mario Party at the end, like no matter how good you are playing throughout the entire game, like that game is like 100% luck. Like they just cheat and they like basically roll a dice, and like whoever comes up wins that game. So like from reasonable to Mario Party, like I hope some people laugh about it, but introduce luck into your game.
It's not one that I'm familiar with, but I do like luck in games personally. So I thought we could do.
Did you have an answer for the second half of the question?
Oh, the second half of the question. Sorry.
Yes, the second half that the person had asked.
What kinds of things can you do to deal with people at your game table that don't accept losing very well? Is that what you were referring to?
Oh, sorry. I think the first half they asked, what can they do to be less affected by it, right?
Yes. Okay, so the question was on the topic of good sportsmanship. Can you share some ideas on how not to be a sore loser?
I'm curious if you two have any answers.
That's a tough one, really. I approach every game I play as time spent with friends or people who I want to get to know a little bit about, even if they're not friends. And so my approach is always, I don't really care who wins. When I do get frustrated, like there are lots of games that get me frustrated. But when I do get frustrated, it's more about, I cannot figure out this game mechanic. I cannot figure out how to maximize my moves, or how to play this strategy, or how to, convert this into that to get victory points. So I'm not sure I'm the best one to come to advice. I think it's about your own personal, perception of yourself, and looking at it and saying, is winning really that important? Or is spending quality time with the people that you're playing with more important?
I mean, part of it is you do get emotionally invested in these things, right? Like if you sit down to play a long game and you tried really hard and you came up short, that can be really frustrating. And especially if you think like you did well and there's some extenuating circumstance that the other person won. If you do think it's legitimately luck, One thing I do, and this might just be like my clinical sort of abstracted out brain that's very detached from things, is I would suggest just try and honestly ask yourself, what cost me that game? Was it actually luck? If it was actually luck, then who cares? It was all random BS.
Right.
And it wasn't your fault that you lost it all. And if it wasn't luck, if you can trace it back and say, oh, I messed up, rather than beating yourself up about it and saying, oh, stupid me, I made this mistake, think about it as a learning opportunity. I just learned something new. That's a great moment. That means that in all future games, you can take this lesson that you learned. Maybe it was that you weren't aggressive enough and you were too timid during the auctions. You should have bet more aggressively. And maybe that's a life lesson you can take from it as well. Maybe that's just your default. Maybe you're particularly conservative, and maybe sometimes you need to be willing to risk things a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and so for me, I just try to play games that I know I will like. So if I'm playing with people who are very, very competitive, I will try to ask if we can play cooperative games. Or if I do play a game that people are competitive, I will play it kind of like what you were saying, Chris. I will play it just to be there with the group. But I'll negotiate. Hey, I'll play Catan a little bit, or I'm just gonna go and take a nap. Go ahead, please. Like if you want to play Catan or like knives and battle, cool, awesome. Like I'll be back. I'm gonna go get a snack or something. So it's just like know yourself, know the players, know the reasons that you're playing the game with them, and pick the games. Like if you go to a group setting and there's a game that you really like, like it's okay, like for you to recommend playing that game.
Yeah, or not play ones you don't want to play.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that we've covered everything that we were going to talk about for the most part. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add, or anything that AJ that we haven't talked to you about?
I mean, I would just sit here and talk to y'all all day because I love you both and I love talking about myself. But I'm happy to wrap up here.
Post show.
Well, AJ, where can people find you if they want to? Of course, where can they find you online or just in general?
For sure. So if people want to see some of my design podcast stuff, I run a design podcast with Peter Hayward, and who has come up many times in this conversation, will come up many times in the future. Then they can check out Fun Problems, and that's a podcast that we run, and that's all about game design. If you enjoyed me talking about game design here, then that's a good way to do it. If you want to contact me, the best way to do that is to send an email to the Gmail account that I have for that podcast, and that is funproblemspodcast@gmail.com. And if you're curious, if you want to hit me up for anything, I don't mind. I like to chat. Then you can just send me an email there. I even do consulting if you're a developer or if you are a publisher. Really, just anything though. If you just want to chat, I'm down.
Cool. I have to say,
thank you so much for joining us today, AJ.
Yes, thank you very much. I have to just throw this in. I feel bad we didn't mention Fun Problems more than we did. Fun Problems. It's an excellent podcast. You guys are doing fantastic stuff. I'm not a game designer, but I love it. And even Sherry and I, we've been listening to it together sort of as a couple. We've got a couple episodes that we need to catch up on, but we've loved everything that we've heard from you guys. So that's excellent work. So Fun Problems podcast, definitely worth a listen. But yes, thank you very much for coming today and for talking to us and sharing all your stories. And I guess that's it. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. This was super fun.
All right, time for the music.
Thanks for listening to Board Game Chats with Chris and Myron. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, check out their website at boardgamechats.com, or drop them an email at boardgamechats@gmail.com. You can also find Board Game Chats on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.